Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show tonight. We are here to discuss the Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks, where at least we didn't trade for Kirk Cousins this offseason.
There's that. I
Yeah,
mean, silver lining.
yeah, yeah. Did you see that game last night? By the way,
A good amount of it. Yeah.
I mean the stats don't even do it justice. He was basically like he looked like Nathan Peterman out there.
He did indeed. He's been able to keep himself a little bit above the era or level of average, but that prior head coach had no love for him. You certainly Washington really couldn't talk himself into giving him a new deal, and you have to wonder for a guy that has put up what he's done statistically. Well, there is something a little bit more here that's as hard to define in him from a skill set or ability standpoint. That is why these coaches have had this kind of trepidation in regards to him.
Yeah, would have cost us Charles Cross probably to get him. By the way, just think about that for
Do
a
you
second.
do you think that's what? Well, you might be onto something because Minnesota would have had to eat some dead money to pull that deal. And as I say, when you're going to ask, if I'm going to ask me as a team to eat more dead money, then you're going to have to give up more draft capital. So that's a good point. It might have costed fully a full first rounder and our high first rounder at that to get that. We didn't have another one, so that would have been the requirement.
Yeah. So that's good, but right now, not a lot is. And obviously, we got to pick through it. I think a lot of us would prefer to set that game tape on fire, just move on from it because there's so little to take away from it other than, well, it's bad.
Yeah.
But let's go with it. I am joined by Brandon of the Hawks Nest. How you doing tonight?
All things being considered, I'm okay. Hanging in there all right. Hopeful for this next week.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So we knew this season could be like this, right? We knew this season was probably going to have some games like this. We knew this is what we were signing up for. And at the end of the day, I don't think you can act terribly surprised going into a season with this kind of roster. Games like this will happen. But to the extent that it happened, maybe that's not okay. I don't know. We'll talk about it, try to see where we land. But 27-7, and honestly, it was probably worse than that, if not for a once in a decade type fluke. We are talking about 30-0. Couldn't run the ball, couldn't really get anything going down the field. Offensive line didn't look good for the most part. Defense could not stop the run at all. Very little pressure on whoever the quarterback was. A lot of penalties in the secondary. It's really hard to find positives coming out of this game. So before we get into the weeds here, let's how do you feel about that game just in general?
I think you do a good job of summating, what really you do see as this game all the way around, and that it is hard to find those pluses or encouragements. I do think you bring up what a point is that you and I both have to keep this at the forefront of our head and mind, and the rest of the fans should as well. And that this is a bumpy road this season. I think you had us at 6 wins this year, and your final projection, I think, I had us at 7. We don't arrive there by us being awesome, and then we just happen to have fallen into a 6-7 win season. We get there, and we saw us getting there because you're going to have these games where the team just kind of falls through. It falls apart a little bit. It looks bad, and that is growing pains to a certain degree. And I will have a level of patience to that to a certain degree, Brendan. I think that the other part of this, though, is it's a balancing game. It's a balancing game of patience on one side, and also then the need for a critical eye and looking at this coaching staff and looking at what they're doing in this rebuild and looking at schematic changes that have been undergone and say, are these the right guys going forward? Are we in the right hands? And you and I have been more encouraged over recent months in what we've seen in the background, both in how they built the roster and the draft and approaching this upcoming season. But it does remain a question. And there were things in this game specifically from weird schematics to not truly adopting these changes defensively or offensively that we're looking to see. And if those continue on as a theme beyond this game, if we're seeing that more often than not over the course of this year, that's where that goes beyond just being patient at that point. That goes to are they or not the right people to manage this forward? I tend to think they are at this point. I'm not saying one game makes me bail, but if you get a collection of these games throughout the course of the season, where it's one thing to lose, Brendan, it's another thing when you've done these things to adopt these things over the last couple of years, and then you're just not adopting them. We'll get more into it, but that's just in general where I see this game. Is it's a little bit of patience, but also a little bit of no. There's a little bit of need for feet to the fire here, just a little bit on certain things.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate assessment. I like everything you had to say there. It's you don't see that many blowouts in the NFL. Usually teams find a way to make it close. So when
Especially
you
this
see a
team.
blowout, you something went wrong, right?
Right, especially this team with Carroll. His natural way he wants to manage a game should keep games relatively close, even in those games where teams are kind of routing us.
Right. Right. So let's okay. Sure. Well, let's start with the offense because that's the side of the ball that didn't score a point, that moved over the 50-yard line like what, once, maybe twice that whole game. I'm not sure. They had one red zone possession. They made one explosive, I guess you would call them. They had one explosive the whole game. The interior of the offensive line didn't play well at all. No running game. Geno set an all-time NFL record. I don't know if you saw that. First time in NFL history, a player had an 80% completion and
Mhm.
did not score a single point.
Not a great stat.
Right.
Not hanging your
So
hat on that one.
yeah, that's one you don't want to have. That's a statistical oddity that you prefer not happen. So I got to start with this run game because in the preseason it looked so promising. And in this game, yes, we did kind of get away from it, but we kind of got away from it because it wasn't working at all. The interior of the offensive line with Gabe Jackson in particular, but pretty much the whole unit, especially after Damian Lewis went down, just not really getting it done. I know Abraham Lucas didn't have a great game. Like what is going on with this running game to where in the preseason it looked like it was going to be the thing that carried us, and through 2 games they have like 100 total yards.
Well, let's look at a couple things with this. First off, I'm with you on that there wasn't a lot of holes there for running backs. I don't think that you committed enough to the running game to really make an assessment of there weren't enough holes throughout the course of the day. They bailed on the running game far before they got really down in the score. They just decided, okay, we're leaving the running game. And when I look at this offensive performance right out the gate, Geno Smith completing 80% of the passes is all well and good, but it's the same question I had last week. Why in the name of God is Geno Smith throwing the ball as much as he is? Geno Smith nor Drew Lock are high volume passers in the NFL. I like both the guys, relatively speaking. I'm hopeful for both of the guys, but both of the guys in their best case scenario, as far as I'm concerned, are game managers. That is their role. Fit them into the role. Don't ask them to do more than they're capable of doing, and you won't have your heart broken. The interior of the line, yes, did play bad. Here's my problem. You had about 10 runs total between Penny and Walker. For some reason or another, you refused to feature Penny at all. Carroll's got a thick chubby for Kenneth Walker in every way because he just can't wait to get the guy out in the field. And that's great, but you spent $5.75 million on Rashad Penny. And here's the other problem I have with it, Brendan, and this is where we get away from patience and into that critical eye territory. You ran the ball 10 times between those guys. 0 runs were on the outside. 0 runs were outside zone. 0 runs were pitch plays. 0 runs were fly sweeps. That is unacceptable. You brought in the McVay offense. You know, people can say, I don't trust the McVay, or it's only good when McVay runs it, which I hear all great. That may be the truth. But you've brought in the offense in. Now you instill it. And if you're hammering up over the A gap 24/7, and you're only going to be obsessed with running inside, as this team has been for the past 10 years, as teams throughout the NFL are very well aware of that being the case, every time they come to play the Seattle Seahawks, no matter where they play them, then you're going to be very easy to be predictable in your running game, and then with it to then stop it. If they want to have success running, they've got to find diversity. Look at what San Francisco did on the other side. Chart through their runs, through the first 5 runs. First plays a pitch play. Another plays a pitch play. Then they're attacking inside. Then you'll get a fly sweep with Deebo Samuel. It's, as I've said, that's what makes San Francisco lethal in the running game. It isn't that they've got the most amazing blockers or it's Trent Williams out there beating everybody single-handedly. What separates them is the diversity of the running game that they utilize. And we have none of that. We didn't utilize any of that this past week. And it's really frustrating for me because why bring on this offense if you don't want to build to it? If you want to run inside zone, that's the offense you want to create, and it's all built around that, then go create that. Go find the guy that runs that offense. Don't take a guy from this offense and then have him apply something that's not what this is. Where were the flood zone concepts? Where were the bubble screens except for the very last play of the game? Like they were slapping us in the face, Brendan. It was like it was like mockery at that point. Eskridge can't get one touch all game. Then he gets his final touch on a bubble screen, which they have not run all game, on the very last play of the offensive play of the game, the very last play of the game. Come on. I mean, come on. I'm not trying to overstate this, but this stuff is weird how you're not at least adopting some of this. I can understand if you want to do your own thing and Carroll wants to do his own thing, and maybe Waldron's not earned enough juice in this league to be doing his own. I create my own offense, actually. I mean, what McVay does is great, but I've got a brilliant mind and I'm creating my own thing. I do 3-man backfields and wildcats, and I'm awesome in that respect. No, I'm really, I don't mean to overstate this too much, Brendan, but it really is driving me crazy. I saw it last year and it's continuing forward here so far through the first 2 weeks of the season.
Yeah, the Dwayne Eskridge thing in particular is bizarre because you spend a second-round pick on the guy. You would think the coaching staff would be forcing him out there to justify that pick, right? Forcing him the ball, trying to make people, because so many people are still so unhappy about that pick. It was, in many ways, people feel like it's emblematic of everything the regime was doing wrong before the Wilson trade.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very odd to me. Apparently, Carroll had a comment in his press conference that he felt that Eskridge is basically having a rookie year this year. Like he took such a big step back. He's acting like a rookie is basically what he said, apparently. That's at least the best way I can interpret it. Basically said he's taken a big step back. He isn't understanding the plays. They're basically saying it's almost like, he just got brainwashed from last year and is starting over as a rookie this year, which that's a pretty big condemnation from your head coach, right? That's not a positive thing.
It's the worst thing you could hear in this situation. He's not 21 coming out of college. He was 24 coming out of college. And you just said a second ago, a keynote thing. People look at it as an example of what the regime was doing wrong drafting prior. Why? Because this is echoes of LJ Collier. We're going to take an old prospect who's really rough and is going to take a really long time to develop. Why? We like him. So you're going to find a use for him in the first year or two? No. We're just going to put him out there in the back of the warehouse and hopefully eventually he comes back out onto the sales floor. So we're just going to go with that. I'm sorry, Brendan. It is asinine. It's ridiculous. This is not his rookie year. He's not a young prospect. He's an older prospect who had holes in his game, which I can accept. He'll never be a great route runner. Maybe would never have great hands, but he can operate with the ball in his hands in space. You desperately need this in this offense right now. Nobody else is providing that component to this offense as it stands. And yet still we're not finding even a smidge, a modichrome, a crumb of a role for this guy.
Yeah. I think that's probably the most confusing thing about this offense to me. Some of it I understand because you have a limited quarterback. Things are not going well in the interior of your offensive line overall. I don't know if you saw the grade that they gave Gabe Jackson for this game, but it was very, very bad.
It is, and I think that it's two things at the same time to me. Yes, the interior of the line is not doing great on the run blocking game, but again, I go back to when you're so predictable as to run up the middle every single rushing attempt. You're not even trying to go to the outside. Defenses are going to then go, oh, I don't have to be worried about the outside. I don't have to worry about you going lateral. You're just trying to go north and south on every single run, right up over the center. They're then going to adjust themselves. They're going to shoot the gaps prior to the snap to take that away from you until you prove you can attack in another way. And Seattle's counter to that seems to be, rather than attacking with diversity, we'll just get pass happy and throw the ball all over the football field.
Yeah. And do you think maybe they're finding out that these offensive linemen just can't block in space the way you need to for outside zone stuff, and they've just decided the best thing to do is just forget about it? Because I mean that was a thing with Damian Lewis, right? He's a big dude. He waddles around out there. Yep. Gabe Jackson is old. He's not really good at that stuff. I think that Phil Haynes and Blythe can do it kind of okay, but maybe they've just kind of decided to throw that stuff out because they know that these offensive linemen just can't do it. If that's the case, I kind of get it. But this is year 2 now. Why didn't you go get some offensive linemen that could do it? That's kind of my thing more so.
So your point, I think, is the salient one here, where if we're talking about just making the transition initially, and it's like, well, we can't get it all done in 1 year, fine. When you're 2 years into this experience, though, and you're talking about these linemen, guys like Gabe Jackson, who you traded for last year, You brought him in after the Waldron hire. So you had made some assessment at that point that indeed he was mobile enough to operate in this. And now there's egg on your face. Yes, I do think you're right. And that they're doing this specifically because they don't trust the lineman to a degree in space. I still wonder with it though, because both Lucas and Cross can do it. And if it's just a matter of getting to the edge, you sometimes don't need as much the guys on the inside, keeping that clean as much outside of maybe getting to the second level. Maybe they're not able to do that. But again, to me, it's ridiculous that you wait 2 years then to address that issue if it's so much a problem as to hinder your scheme to where you're essentially throwing out 3/4 of your rushing offense. That playbook is all gone. You're keeping like 25% at the most on basically inside runs, inside out of pistol, read option out of shotgun. Like that's about it at that point. Delay up the middle. Yeah, like that's it. That's all. That's your rushing playbook at this point. And again, I just can't help if I'm any defensive mind with even just a smidge of a couple brain cells they can rub together are going to go, I'm going to stop the middle there. They'll beat me another place. I'm taking that. It would be the first thing you do. You're telling your defensive people on Monday morning as you're putting a game plan together for the new team. Okay, guys, this team does not run outside. We're only going to have you guys shooting gaps on the inside. I want nobody doing anything but doing that until they prove us otherwise. And Seattle didn't this last Sunday. 10 runs, all up the middle.
Right. Garth Knight, thank you for the $5. One thing is for sure, the inmates and Pete got their Super Bowl, and now we just need to hold on for Jody to sell. Yeah. We talked about last week how Bill Belichick has kind of gone off the deep end in New England with this weird triumvirate of offensive. They're not coordinators, but they're like, it's just this weird thing that you've never seen before.
Yeah.
And he's kind of just saying, well, I can do whatever I want. Bill Belichick's won 6 Super Bowls in New England. So when he goes crazy and does something that seems asinine and he basically just says, well, I can do whatever I want, that makes a little more sense than a guy who's won one, right? Like
right. Especially one guy, the guy that won the one that's 10 years ago. Belichick's won in that 10 years since Carroll's won his one, Belichick's won 3 just in that time frame alone. If we're talking about recent history goes, and Belichick's, he's crazy, but hey, when you're the best coach of all time and you've earned that a lot, you get a chance at that point. You're right to me to do that type of situation like he is. I don't agree with it. I think it's silly. Ego's a mofo, Brendan, for these coaches. I'll tell you what, but especially as the bigger you get, it seems like, but yeah, they're at this point in time, it's, I'm not fully in this boat yet of saying that they're not the right ones. I'm not going to base it off a game here or 2 games here, but if we come to the end of this season and I'm sitting here in the same place going, didn't see any of the real offensive modifications. We'll get to the defensive side of this because the same problems are up on the defense with this too, by the way. And we're going to get to that spot. I'm not going to just, wash over it and go, oh, well, no, that's you not adopting scheme changes. Again, the problems always come back to scheme with this coaching staff and where they just can't adopt to a modernized version of what they need to do. It's all just back into the old habits. I mean, how much soft zone? Again, I don't want to get to defense, we're on offense right now, but it's just, you're falling back in the old habits, which look very familiar.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I'm saying. It's like sometimes it with some of these decisions that have been made, like for instance, spending a high pick on guys like Collier and Eskridge, and then you can't. It's not like you gave them a chance and they didn't do anything. No, you just don't play them. It's very, very odd. Like I said, when a coach spends a high draft pick on somebody like that, you think they'd be forcing them out there.
Yeah.
No, Marquise Goodwin is getting quadruple the snaps of Eskridge so far. Like Goodwin is clearly the number 3 receiver. It's not even close.
Yeah. And it's dude, second round pick of last year, as old as he was, it just, I don't think you can cover this kind of stuff up. And then maybe they've changed their ways drafting since then because now Schneider's taking over and that was a Carroll draft maybe, but it doesn't change the fact that it's a ridiculous pick 2 years in now who can't get on the football field. And especially again, when you desperately need the role that he could come and provide. Marquise Goodwin's not running fly sweeps or is going to do anything with the ball in space as far as yak go. He's a speed guy who can maybe give you a catch from time to time, but they've determined, like you said, I guess this is his rookie year at 25 years old.
Not good. Wasn't John Ursua like 27 when he had his rookie year because of the it was something crazy like that. Yeah. But that was a joke. That was like a meme. Like this is not a meme. This is like serious.
Not when it's a second round pick. You think on a second round pick on draft day, if I go to you, Brendan, and I say, okay, we drafted a 24-year-old receiver really fast, like a real poor man's Tyreek type. you'd say, okay, well, let's find a way to manufacture touches for this guy over the course of a game. Get him the ball 3 or 4 times. To me, you could have him not run one single route all game long. You want to run Dwayne Eskridge on 4 fly sweeps a game? Great. It will do wonders for stretching those defenses out and keeping them honest. But pre-snap motion, just another one of those things that we see in little sprinkles, little sprinkle of pre-snap motion.
No, if you want to see that, you got to watch the Huskies game on Saturday. Every
Huskies,
single play.
I know. That's the thing. This is the evolution of it. 2013, I saw some chart back then. It was like, I think 10 to 15% of the snaps, there was pre-snap motion NFL wide. By 2018, 2019, I think it was up to 60%, 65%. It is moving quickly in this direction where every play prior to the play, there will be pre-snap motion as we go 5 to 6 years from now. So if you have a team desperately clutching to, we don't like running pre-snap motion because it just creates, you're going to get left behind.
Fat Daddy Stacks, thank you for the $5. Not going to sweat it. Already knew that this season is going to take a lot of patience. I still am excited to watch a different team with upside. And there's a lot of merit to thinking that, for sure. I don't particularly mind thinking about things like this. That's mostly how I think about it too. The part that becomes difficult is quite the process, because the process should be, it shouldn't be this thing where you have no idea how to use a guy like Dwayne Eskridge and you're running wide 9 against a team that loves to do outside zone runs. Like, that doesn't make sense. And that makes you wonder about the process. But generally speaking, I agree with this comment.
I do too. In fact, Daddy Stacks, I'm going to be there with the patience this year myself. My worry and concern is that if we have a coach who's not willing to adopt to the modernized NFL offense, it's already been proven that if he's going to just be stuck in his ways of running to run the old, and there's a limited return on that, no matter how good you do rebuilding wise, as far as the amount of talent you add, they will be hindered and held back by that, not into this year, but into the years beyond. And that's the thing where I have a little more concern beyond the patience, because I'm seeing little slight shows and signs here that there's not that really willingness to go forward with that. It's a lot of the same old we've seen on offense outside of the deep shots taken. Obviously, they were a little more of the short and intermediate game in the passing, which is great to see. I love that. But the fact that you're a running based team that's trying to pass 2-1 in both of your first 2 games out the gate is again, this is weirdness by the coaching staff. Broncos were top 5 in passing last year. Let's throw the ball on them. They're top 15 against stopping the run, but let's throw the ball on them. It's sort of just, it's very strange. Sometimes along some of the stuff, it defies a little bit of explanation, quite frankly.
Oh, the passing game real quick, which was the part of the offense that worked a little bit on Sunday. Still not a whole lot, but it was better. We did have one completed big play down the field. We had another one called back on a penalty. And Pete had some things to say, I think it was Monday after the game. He basically said the reason why we are not taking any shots down the field really is because we didn't trust our offensive line because of our rookie tackles. We didn't want Geno to have to sit back in the pocket at all, really. We wanted him to be able to get the ball out quickly pretty much every play, with 1 or 2 exceptions over the first 2 weeks. And then he said those 2 guys, Cross and Lucas, have played well enough to where we're going to open it up from now on. And theoretically, that could have a pretty big effect on things, because if you can force those safeties to stay back, you can force the defense to respect the fact that you might hit them 40 yards down the field, then that can open up your run game as well. Do you think that's going to have a big impact on this offense if we practice what Carroll was preaching in that press conference?
I think it'll help. You haven't gone deep at all in the first few games. I'm a big believer, Brendan, in the fact that you should probably attack a couple times over the course of a game. Doesn't matter what type of offense you are. If you're a spread offense that wants to throw dink and dunk, or you're a West Coast based offense, or you're an offense that wants to hammer deep shots, I think no matter what, you always need to make the defense aware of the fact that you're looking to hit it deep and you want to hit it deep, and they need to respect that. So I would like to see more built in. I think it will help, especially when you have 2 guys who in the last probably 5 years, you could say 2 of the top best deep threat receivers in the league reside on this roster. So you're also throwing to what is the strength of what you do well. I think it's valid for Coach Carroll to say he had some worries about rookie tackles holding up. If you want to throw deep, it's not just a matter of throwing deep. It's also that I've got to let those long developing plays get up the football field. And that takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Joey Bosa's on the other side of that. We saw with 2 sacks he already had in this game with him just throwing short. that could get ugly really quick if you're having him do too much of that. But you've got to work it in a little bit, Brendan. You've got to script it up. You've got to put it in moments to do it over the course of a game, I think. So it's going to help. But to me, this is going to come back to offensively fixing this. It comes back to a dedication to running the ball and a dedication to running the ball with some diversity.
Yeah, I the way I put it earlier today was an offense with a quarterback that can't go deep is like a basketball offense with a point guard that can't shoot.
Yeah.
If your point guard can't
great
shoot,
comparison.
yeah, like that's why I hated Rajon Rondo back in the day. I was like, I don't care how good a passer he is. The way defenses play teams with Rajon Rondo at point guard is so strangling. Like he was on these offenses with Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and they were still bottom 5 in the league in points per 100 possessions because you could basically just have your defender sag 6 feet off Rondo at all times. There were games where the guy who was nominally defending Rondo could basically just play like a designated hitter. I'm going to take defense off tonight because he's not going to hit these shots. So with Gino has the arm, right? I mean, he doesn't have an amazing arm, but he can hit those throws, right? We agree on that, right?
100% he can. Yeah, he hit it last year in the Saints game on where they threw it on Lattimore. So yeah, he's got the arm to hit those throws.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that they stick to that. I'm hoping that they do it. Even if Cross and Lucas can't hold up amazing, you still have to do it. I don't think you can just throw it out because we're afraid that our rookie tackles might not hold up. So,
and it's a little simplistic again to just blame it all on the tackles, Brendan. Sorry, just the one thing that jumps to mind is like, you can't chip, you can't help, you can't like. I mean, we're fearful of the whole defensive line of the Niners? Like everybody's crazy good, even Kinlaw. We're worried about him. Like you're worried to leave him single blocked. Get your doubles on the guys you're worried to get a running back in on a chip, set up to have maybe less guys going out in their routes, and try to set that big shot up in that way. So there's other ways outside of I just need my tackles to hold up as well. It's a little bit of a cop out to just say that's your only reason for not going deep through the first couple of weeks.
Right. At the end of the day, if you had no plan to take deep shots this year, you probably should not have re-signed Metcalf because that's 100%. His game.
100%. That's, I mean, you're taking, it's again playing, it's playing with one arm behind your back a little bit when you don't have to.
Right. Garth Knight, thank you for the $10. Pete looks like Viserys from the new Game of Thrones. He's old and misguided by his handlers like Richard Sherman. He still thinks he's cool while being manipulated by idiots on Amazon, though. So I've never seen Game of Thrones, so I have no idea what this is talking about.
Are you anti-fantasy, or is it just?
Oh, no, not at all. It's just I never started watching it. By the time I thought about it, everyone said it was terrible. Like it had become, everyone was hating on the last 2 seasons, and I was like, okay, do I want to spend a bunch of hours of my life watching a show that is going to have a terrible ending? Like, I don't know.
No, you're right. It was as far as it went off the rails, and I loved the early Thrones, but as far as it went to the other end of it off the rails, you're probably saving yourself some undue anger on that one because it was a horrible end to that show, just awful. And it's an apt comparison there by Garth. And this is the thing about Pete. I've said is I've had my knocks with Pete. These are things he can correct and fix. They are not outside of his control. The game is not passed him by. But he's got to accept the fact that he's got to bring these components to his coaching game. And if he just decides the way I've done in the past is the way I'm going to do in the future, and it worked once before and it'll work again, we've been shown that if you're going to run that purified, you're going to go purified on that. We've seen what that is. That's what we've watched the last 5 years, Brendan. We've watched the last 5 years as he's tried to rebuild the Legion of Boom. We've watched the last 5 years as he's tried to fit Wilson in his little canary cage. We've watched it. We've seen how far that can get you. And the answer is just barely into the playoffs. At the best.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And also, I actually think Sherman's doing okay on Amazon. His what is it? The pregame stuff that he does, not bad.
He's got fit into it. It takes time to find your footing with this stuff, and he's going to be great. He'll be a natural on this stuff when it's all said and done.
The Snail, thank you for the $5. What is Gino's average depth of target? Who cares if he's 80% if it's all short or behind the line? Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. It is all short or behind the line.
Yeah.
And that's the issue.
Yeah. And again, the one thing I do want to say on this, because I was getting a lot of push in my chat during the game, and I went back and watched the all 22 tape of offensively and watching Gino and watching the routes. nobody's busting open wide open where Geno's missing guys right and left. That's not happening. There's no deep route that's breaking free wide open that Geno's not seeing. They ran a lot of short stuff. They ran a lot of intermediate stuff. He can only throw to what the offensive play coaches are calling in the game. And Geno made good decisions in this game. He threw the ball where it needed to go. You stop the all-22 and you look at it before he makes the throw and you're like, all right, I'm watching what we got going on here as far as the coverage goes. This is the guy open here and it's going to be a tough throw, but that's as open as it gets here. And it would be Lockett, him hitting it on an out route there, which was the only throw to hit on the play. I thought his decision-making was pretty on point watching the all-22 sideline view of it where it's a little bit back behind. And so I don't think it's on him, but yeah, you're right, Snail. We do have to push this ball up the field a little bit more than that. You've got to have it's about not just doing, it's like they get into this one thing approach. We'll run just up the middle. We'll throw just short and intermediate. Well, what about long? No, just short and intermediate. Well, it's like they get very simplified very quickly when they don't have to.
And the one time we actually had deep penetration, we took him off the field to run Wildcat too. Let's not forget that. And let me just say this. I like the idea of doing stuff like that when Geno Smith is your quarterback. You're not losing value taking Geno off the field for a play or two a game, but you did it twice in a row, which was weird. And then the play looks so bad. You're like, did you practice this at all?
Yeah.
It's like you can't put Geno out there when he's playing fine and just try to see if he can get the touchdown.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like doing a trick play. I like the DK play. That would have been the play to do it in on. That's the spot. That's the moment. You're at the 50. It's where you've got the Niners leaning up in the run game. So it's a great time to attack in that respect. I don't like going back to the well because the team is first. You've already run it once. So the team's aware you guys are more open to running it today than they might normally go to. And then what they did it out of the Wildcat formation with 3 guys. So what that does to a defense, Brendan, is it makes them stay disciplined. It doesn't get them to overcommit, which is what you're trying to do in a trick play, is get them to overcommit to where the play is going initially so you can hit them to the secondary side. But when I've got 3 running backs in a backfield, I don't know who's getting the ball. So I'm not in an aggressive approach. I'm trying to read who's trying to get the ball, which is going to keep me a little more tentative in a read and react mode, which then leads to the interception, in my opinion, in that given situation. It's kind of just I don't want to see that play call anymore. That's a dumb play call I'm okay with running back passes, but the defense is going to stay to more discipline because they're going to, anytime a defense has got a question mark, like what's going on here? Stay to your fundamentals, stay disciplined, stay home. That's what a coach would be telling you. So what I'm seeing 3 running backs. I don't normally see this fate. There's no quarterback back there right now. What do I do? What do I do? Stay home, stay disciplined, which is not over aggression, which is the number one thing you need for a flea flicker or any kind of trick play is over aggression. The defense going too far.
Yeah. When I saw that twice in a row, my first thought was Geno must be hurt. And for some reason they don't want to put lock in. Like, I understand doing it once. And by the way, even on the first play, Walker, I'm pretty sure, was supposed to hand it off and he didn't. He read the defensive end wrong. Somehow he still got positive yards. So, shout out to him. That was actually really impressive for him to get out of the backfield there. But you look at those 2 plays and you're like, did you guys practice this at all? That really didn't look good.
No, it really didn't. And it's twice in a row, just so strange and not, again, we're both on board with doing the trick plays, but don't do it down there when you're inside the red zone, especially when Geno's had his best day. I mean, he's throwing some laser beams across the field there on that drive, looking good. And then now you're going to take the ball out of his hands right now when you're finally in a rhythm. So strange.
Daryl Chapman, thank you for the $4.99. Levis or Stroud? One is going to be 24, but more pro ready. The other is going to only be 21, but more than likely isn't going to come guns blazing. All right, let's spend a minute here. So what do you got?
I'm still on Levis through the first few weeks of the season. His performance against Florida really did stand out to me against his toughest competition so far to begin things. He had another red zone interception in this game. And Brendan, you're going to hear a ton from your chat through the months as we get into the draft season, talking about the fact Levis throws too many interceptions. There's too many interceptions. And again, I come back and I say that context always matters. If I've got a guy like KJ Jefferson that's standing back and he's doing a 1 read look, right? And he looks to his 1 read and he lets it go, and he happens to not get intercepted very often, that's understandable to me versus the guy who's under center, turning his back to the secondary, coming off of his drop, going through 1, 2, then to his third read, and then letting it rip. And then that ball is intercepted on a pretty well thrown ball, but it was just undercut at the right moment. that type of situation, I'm not going to knock Levis as much for, and why I'm not going to hammer him as much for probably having more interceptions than these Strouds or your KJ Jeffersons are like that, because he's running a pro style offense. And that's what comes with this, is as he's learning it, as he's understanding the ropes. Most of these guys have to do this at the pro level. He's doing it right now. So I still think no quarterback has necessarily vaulted themselves any further beyond what my assessment was of them prior to the year. Levis and Stroud are still my 1 and 2 on my list. I like what I've seen from Stroud. I didn't like him a couple weeks ago in the game where I felt like he was a little underwhelming in the other game when he's lost these great pass catchers they've had, because they had the 2 guys leaving and then his other guy was injured last week. Right. That you really got to see him kind of struggle in there. We didn't have guys running just wide open 5, 6, 7 yards. And so things got a little bit harder on him. But to Daryl's point, the kid's going to have a little bit more upside maybe than Levis in the long term, especially as a passer. And so what do you want to lean towards? I'm still Levis. I want the pro ready guy. I want the guy who's been running our offense. I want to get this rebuild turned around fast. I'm not interested in 3 years of this stuff. I'm interested in let's get this going.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to quarterbacks, we might want to start getting into the mentality of age doesn't matter as much. Maybe it matters for different reasons.
Yeah.
Because maybe you don't even want to be giving them the 3rd or 4th contract. Maybe you want to not even give them a 2nd contract some of the time. So maybe the age, like Hendon Hooker is a good example, because I think he's going to be 25 when he gets drafted. And at first that bothered me, but now I'm thinking about it. I'm like, just look at him as a rookie contract guy. Get him in for 4 or 5 years, and then you move on. Or if he's really good, you can give him 1 more contract. But are you really going to grandstand because you didn't get a 20-year career? You're going to be mad that, oh, you only gave me 10 great years instead of, 15 great years or whatever. So I'm starting to think that age thing with the way quarterback contracts are right now doesn't matter as much.
No, it doesn't. For me, I'm in that boat. I've landed there firmly. I don't look at other prospect positions in this way, but no other prospect position is built the same way of what you need from a quarterback. And again, understanding that you've hit the nail on the head. To me, it's about getting that guy in that rookie contract and getting the most out of that rookie contract of that guy, having him ready, getting every year you can in a go mode. You're spending money across the board on the rest of your team, giving him as much as you can to work with. And let's see if that model can work. Let's see if that's a feasible blueprint. Nothing contained within that is about second contracts or, by the time you give him a second contract, he'll be 29 years old. Like I said, I don't care. If he's ready to ball now and I can get him on the field immediately and he's going to be better than what I got, sign me up. I don't care about the age stuff. That's to me a little bit, irrelevant, especially if we can benefit from it. Where, he drops an extra round because he's this, or he drops an extra 15 because he is this thing. Well, not from my standpoint.
Yeah. Daniel Bailey, thank you for the $5. My Eskridge theory. He studied Waldron's playbook and didn't get the Pete Carroll revision copy. So now he doesn't know 80% of the playbook. It sometimes really feels like a Pete Carroll offense, I guess.
Very little pre-snap motion, hammering the run game. There have been more short and intermediate passing, but outside of that, there's nothing that has really deviated from the Pete Carroll designs of what he wants offensively speaking. So maybe very well may be the case here, where it's like, no, you're not coming as a fly sweep. We're just going to have you run out of the slot and run your normal route. But don't you guys want me to run bubbles or something? Only if we're down at the end of the game, like to run the clock out if we're down. Yeah.
I mean, there's still 15 games left for us to figure some of this stuff out, I think. So
hopefully they'll start to work them in here somehow or another.
Yeah. Fat Daddy Stacks, thank you for the $2. Love the breakdown and agree. We will be fine. Oh yeah, we as fans are going to be fine, man. We're living our best lives.
We are.
Yeah. Life is good overall. Trust me. I mean, Denver hired a moron to be their head coach. What's better than that? They might win 5 games this year. Like life is good.
Oh, it's beautiful. And looking better in that respect all the time as the song goes. So now we'll be fine. You're right, Brad Daddy. And things we'll get through all this process and we'll figure out what's what when it's all said and done. So it'll get more clear. No matter what you said, your words about having patience here are the key words here. And we're all going to need to, remember that throughout the course of the season as we're being tested in that patience.
Yeah. Just to spend a minute on this real quick. Did you see some of the stuff that happened in that Houston game?
I did. I did. It's for it to be 2 weeks in like this, and it's already getting into this state of things. I didn't think it was going to take off. Neither nor you nor I thought this was going to take off with Russell necessarily the way the national media was setting this up. But I also didn't think it was going to go quite as quickly sideways as it currently is a little bit.
Yeah. What was your favorite? Was it when they called a timeout because they forgot to put a punt returner on the field? Or was it when they gave up a field goal because they had a delay of game before they got the snap off and had to punt?
Neither. The fans calling down a play clock at home,
Uh,
that
yeah.
they are to that quickly a state where you have nearly all the fans in the stadium in unison, so frustrated, so in a fervor on the first home game of the year. and they're to the point of calling out the play clock because they can't get it in. It's an awful look. It's for all involved. It just is. It's great the fans are helping, but it's, normally you're wanting your fans quiet, right? When you want the offense to snap, but
Yeah.
like they have to
Yeah.
help them.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me just say though, even though he's clearly going to be a pretty awful coach, I think Hackett, he's different than these other coaches. Like he's like, he's very humble. He comes out in these press conferences. He's like, yeah, I would have booed me too. Or, I apologize to our fans for that display. They had the preseason game where they got blown out, and he's like, I apologize to our fans. Like, you don't see coaches do that often.
No, you don't. You don't. And I mean, I'm sure there's some coaches out there, with their ego out there going, yeah, that's a sign of weakness, Brendan. That's why you don't do that. That's a sign of weakness. And they're just going to attack the second they see that weakness. That's why we get these coaches that just, I do nothing wrong. Everything I do is amazing. My stuff don't stink. And it's nice to see him humbled on it. I mean, he doesn't have a little bit of in some of the stuff, he just doesn't have a choice. I mean, it's like there's those times, Brendan, it's like when you're starting to fall, like you're running or something, and then you start to trip, and everything you're trying to do is to regain your balance, but you just you're going to fall at some point. It's now or 10 steps down the line, and the momentum's already started. And it sort of feels like with him, no matter what he does, he's due to go face first here at some point or another. And it's begun. It hath begun on it. And it's him going out and not doing the field goal attempt in this game. I think he went for it on a shorter field goal kick in the home stadium of the thin air. There was that moment too. I mean, it's one of those things that it's hard. It's hard when momentum starts going down this track.
He said he's not giving up play calling, so it probably won't get better. It's that thing you talk about where you don't want your head coach being a play caller.
No, and especially a first-time coach who obviously is still figuring it out, who doesn't have the whole, I got this down, I've been ready for this since the day I was born type thing of rather than, I got to have my lumps here. I need to go through some growing pains. Oh, now you need to call the plays as well and be in sync with that. Yeah, it's not hard to understand why it's too much. We're not in the age of 80s or 90s anymore. Stuff has become specialized. Stuff has become so intricate that to think that you can just spin all those plates at once and keep them on in your head. It's as they say, they've done studies. The mind that tries to do multiple things at once, you can't do it. You can only really concentrate on one thing at a time. The whole multitasking stuff is kind of a misnomer.
The snail, thank you for the $5. I agree. I don't think it's Geno. This offense looks ill-conceived. Well, I'm hoping adding a few deep balls a game frees things up a little bit. I think that could definitely be something that had a negative effect.
I do as well. I think you do let it rip. He's got the arm to do it. And it's well said, Snail. I mean, this is where, the designs of this just may not be on point here. I mean, they may not be adapting things the way they want, or Carroll's thinking, okay, I'll bring in the McVay thing, but like I did with Schottenheimer, I'll bring in some of it, but I still want all my old stuff, which that just again comes down to, as I said, with the Schottenheimer thing, it's why Schottenheimer reached the point of a mutual parting of ways. It's being reported now that Coach Carroll fired him. I'm hearing some of even Seahawks reporters that have put this out on Twitter. He didn't get fired. It was a mutual parting of ways. And you can say, well, that was just Coach Carroll being nice to him, so he's not throwing any shit. Maybe. Or maybe Schottenheimer was fed up with the fact that he inherited 70% of his playbook here, and he's not getting to run his own show. And so right. if it's happened once, my point is that it can be happening once again with the new coordinator. That's proof of a much larger, especially, and that's what we're kind of seeing on the field right now from a schematic standpoint.
The Snail, thank you for the $2. How bad are the 49ers going to beat the Donkeys? Yeah, that's a very interesting game. And if the Broncos lose a home game in September to a good team, a good Niners team, but not a great team,
Mhm.
I think it could be a race to the bottom. I think it could be like that 5-win season that I mentioned earlier. Because you look at that schedule, it starts soft, and their last 6 games are brutal. So they could, if they lose a game like this that is supposed to be a gimme, any home game in September, it could just be like
Yeah.
through the
I
floor.
I agree. I do think the Niners are going to give it to them pretty good in this game, because they're going to run. I mean, I talked about us not running the ball. The Niners in this game passed the ball better than us, Brendan. They still finished off with 45 rushing attempts in this football game against us
Right.
this last Sunday. And that Denver Bronco team, like I said, we went into that game and said, okay, you're fourth last year against the pass, so we're going to throw on you. Niners are going to look at it and go, you're top 15 against the run last year versus what you did versus the pass. We're just going to run it on you. And they're going to be successful because that's how you can go after that Bronco defense.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see how that one plays out. I think that game could be like a big pivot point for Denver's season and maybe Frisco's as well, actually. But let's talk about the defense now because it wasn't a lot better on that side. I will say they fought hard in that second half. I think they only allowed the 1 touchdown in the entire second half, but almost 200 yards allowed rushing. Jimmy G comes off the bench cold, having not really worked at all in the offseason because of the injury, and he still moves the ball on you. All the penalties on the secondary, very little quarterback pressure. Where do you start with that one, right? I like I said, I'm okay with this team playing poorly at times. I'm okay with this team. It's going to be a process, but I look at that Niners team and I'm like, okay, no Kittle. Interior of the offensive line is all messed up. No Elijah Mitchell. They lose their quarterback 10 plays in. You should do better than that. So what do we got?
Well, it was interesting on second viewing of the defense on my all 22 look of them, Brendan. They actually did some 4-3 under stuff, which I was encouraged to see at times, which we were calling for in our pregame view of the Niners. Unfortunately, Darrell Taylor can't tackle, so as he's scraping down the line of scrimmage free to get a running back, he's just going to whiff past that running back, and it's not going to make any difference if you're running the 4-3 under stuff because he's a ghost at that point. He might as well not exist on that defensive line in those situations at times. Which I saw multiple times that occur, by the way, that given scenario, all the blockers are taken up. Puna hits the gap. Here comes Darrell to come down. He's got a free hit at the guy. I'm not talking about the Deebo Samuel play. It's another play. Then there's the Deebo Samuel play on top of it. Other than that, you ran a lot more of the 4-man fronts again, Brendan. It would seem that once Jamal Adams went down, we dispersed with any of the real high pressure blitzing stuff. We were told this was going to be a pressure based defense. Do you see a lot of pressure based out there? Do you see anything approaching pressure based out there? Because we look kind of soft to me. We look kind of like we're just chilling back on our heels, like just don't give up the big play kind of look. Am I off on that?
I mean, you certainly didn't see any pressure in that game. You saw a lot of the same old stuff, except now we can't stop the run, partially because you lost Bobby, which we knew about, partially because Shelby Harris leaves that game and leaves you with not enough defensive linemen after 3 plays, meaning you have to run this wide 9 quite a bit because then you only have like the 2 linemen on the field. And therefore you get run all over when you should have known that Shelby Harris wasn't ready for this game. He didn't practice this week. Should have had Miles Adams active instead of Sidney Jones, who you don't use at all.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit to unpack there, but yeah, it is a different defense in terms of you see how they're lining up, like the wide 9 stuff. I see the 3-4 stuff, but what has changed beyond just the technical stuff? Has anything changed in terms of the way the team plays? I'm not seeing it yet.
I'm not either. You're in a gap and a half defense. I'm not seeing a lot of guys getting one gap and getting in the backfield really outside of every once in maybe 10 plays, 15 plays, Brendan. There was one play that really summated it for me on this, where it's again, it's easy to play against the Seahawks defense because it is so predictable. It always comes back to predictability again. It all comes back to, we're in a modern offense where you should be tough to deal with. You should be tough to prepare for. You should be keeping coaches up through the middle of the night, burning that oil, trying to figure out how they're going to solve all the variances of what you can do in your scheme. But let me give you an example of this from an all 22 of a play that I saw here, Brendan. You've got a typical, you've got a 3 wide receiver. You've got a 3 wide receiver look. Okay. And it's I formation, 2 wide receivers, But what Seattle does is they stay in zone. They don't ever go in man. And so what that means is that your outside corners are going to stay on their own side of the field, and they don't leave that side of the field. Okay. But what happens when you then put two receivers to one side of the field in that formation? Your corner over here stays. Your corner over there is there, but we have one more guy, don't we? So there's a play where they run this formation, San Francisco does, and you have Josh Jones as your strong safety then, 13 to 14 yards off of that second inside receiver. Okay. Receiver on the outside runs off. Michael Jackson, the corner out here. Tariq Woolen's sitting way over on the other side of the field. He ain't nowhere near the play. He ain't covering anybody on this play because he's zone. That's zone in his area. So now you're asking your strong safety, Josh Jones, to come up like he's a slot defender there from his natural strong safety position and then cover the guy out of that slot. After, so it's like, imagine you're having to run up. That guy's running at you, right? You're like, I got to get up. And he's running at you. How hard is it for you to then stay in front of that guy? Because he's got to make one move on you and then he's gone. It's not like you're running step for step in his back pocket, if this makes sense, where you can just stay with whatever he's doing moment to moment, right? It's instead, I'm coming at you and I've got to make a choice. Am I going left or right? It's like a soccer kick when the guy comes down for a penalty kick. And it's like the goalkeeper's got to decide to dive one way or another. He can't react to what the guy's doing. He's got to make a determination. Same thing there for Josh. You're not putting that player in a position to succeed there. He can't stop that. And sure enough, it's an easy out route all day by the Niners from that inside guy, because there's no way a strong safety is going to come up and make that kind of coverage. You need a corner on that side to deal with that. And if we're running more pressure-based packages, if we're running a little more man stuff, which you will run if you're running more pressure-based packages, we would see a little bit of an answer for this. But instead, they look like they don't have answers at times, and it's because of these kind of situations where smart coaches like Shanahan will scheme the hell out of that all day. Oh, you're going to keep Tariq just to one side? You're going to keep your corners on either side, never move them around? That's just where I know where they'll be every play pre-snap. Every play I know where they'll be. And I know probably the type of coverage they're going to run, which is going to be cover 3. Well, again, it's like that running game thing I talked to you, Brendan. We start to go, how hard is it to prepare for that team? How hard is it to stop if I know you're limited and you're going to be very corridor-like in your view of how you can succeed on either side of the ball?
Right. I think that's a great summary of it. I'm not shocked that this is taking a while to have everything get implemented in, because the last 2 years, if you look at it, when the Seahawks defense started the season, they didn't play very well. Mm-hmm. So now switching to a brand new defense, I was aware that there could be a similar growing pains process. And for all that, I know that the game would have played differently if we had Jamal Adams. I think Jamal Adams was a big part of our plans this year.
Agreed.
I get that. I totally understand that. But I'm still looking at it and going, one guy had a tweet, I think it was earlier today, where he said, the only player on the Seahawks defense I saw who knew what he was doing and where he was supposed to be is Cody Barton. Like he said, everyone else is having like some kind of obvious coverage bust or just looking really bad. Cody Barton's the one guy who didn't embarrass himself in the all 22 I watched. And I mean, I get it from some of these players, right? Like Tariq Woolen, it's a miracle he's even out there right now. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kobe Bryant, same thing. He probably shouldn't even be playing nickel. He's probably miscast as a nickel corner. Okay. Yep. But how is Quandre Diggs missing tackles? He's been in the league for years. He's a Pro Bowler. He's one of the best safeties in the league. How is that guy missing tackles?
I agree. I think there's times I could show you like a screenshot that I've got from the game that I got it's not a screenshot, but a picture some photographer had taken of him out there trying to take one of the running, like taking Debo down the open field. And you got Cody Barton and Jordan Brooks chasing after the ball carrier, not there helping at all. I mean, free safeties are going to give up tackles. Earl Thomas gave up tackles when you often put him one-on-one in the open field with a guy and he had no help or no way to force the guy to a leverage point to get him out of bounds or whatnot. I mean, that's a little bit of the nature of the beast when you have an undersized free safety that you're there for the playmaking ability he provides on the back end. I think Diggs is a fine enough tackler. We're asking him to do it too often. The guys up front aren't doing their job. And the linebackers, I mean, maybe Barton's doing, I don't understand that. I don't get that Barton was great on the all-22. That was not my view of things. He wasn't awful, but Barton's not been anywhere near helpful as far as what he's doing for the middle linebacker position, especially in the run game,
I don't think the point was he was great. The point was he's the one guy. He was the only guy who I didn't notice do something really, really dumb in that game.
And I can get that, I guess. I mean, I would go to two guys first before I'd go to Cody Barton and Uchenna Nwosu and Al Woods. Those were the two guys
Okay.
to me that, I mean, if I'm going to pick any two guys out of this game that were the guys doing their job and on point, those are the two guys that I would look at. And Uchenna to me did nothing from a stupidity standpoint to not do anything but build upon his performance from last week. He was all over the field. In fact, he was doing too much at the end. I think he was trying to put the team on his back. That's why that offsides penalty where he made that play in the backfield where he tried to jump the snap a little bit because he was trying to do too much. He's like, God, I'm the only guy out here making plays. And Al Woods in the same respect. Thank God for Al Woods. We sunk all this money into Brian Monet. We sunk all this money into Quinn Jefferson this offseason. We've sunk all this money into Poona Ford. And he's the only guy giving you really anything from a productivity standpoint out of the middle there. It's hallelujah for him on that. But
well, okay. I mean, Shelby played good against the Broncos, and then he played 3 snaps this game. I think Shelby's good.
Yeah, no, Shelby will be fine. I wouldn't mention him as the problem. And I haven't seen a lot of him yet, but I mean, I'm expecting him to give us pressure from the inside and to be a player when it's all said and done. It's more of just them choosing at the time to sign those 3 guys that I mentioned. I thought all 3 of those signings were odd. Especially with Poona, you're making that signing because you think he can become a 3 tech, which he's not showing the signs of being able to be a 3 tech. And I don't know how he's going to fit as a 3-4 defensive end because I don't know if he has enough size out there from what you normally want from a 3-4 defensive end as far as not being 6 foot. You usually want the 6'4". There's a body type that you usually lean towards with these type of guys, and you don't have it right now. And you're trying to make it work. You're trying to fit it in and force it. And those guys, with all the money we've given them, it's not been some insane contracts, but the money we've given those guys, I'd like to get a little bit more productivity rubbed out between the 3 of them than just maybe a couple tackles through 2 games and no pressures and no sacks. That to me is, if you're going to put them, I can get that out of just a basic drafted guy in the back end almost. What are you providing here?
Yeah. So when talking about the defense, there are 2 guys in particular that I want to highlight here as, starting to wonder. I'm not all the way there yet. But I'm getting there slowly, and I can be there by the end of this season. I'm talking about Darrell Taylor and Jordan Brooks, because guys like Tariq Woolen, Michael Jackson, Kobe Bryant, I understand it's not going to be perfect all the time. It's not going to be great.
Sure.
You're going to have problems. Guys like Cody Barton, they're almost certainly out of here at the end of the year anyway, so who cares? He's a glorified special teamer for the most part. You have some other guys who are kind of like that too, like Mafe. Mafe is a rookie. Of course, I'm not going to expect the world of him. But Taylor and Brooks are in their 3rd year. I know Taylor's technically in his 2nd year, but he's an older guy. And Brooks played a lot last year after playing a decent amount the year before. And I was anticipating both guys to take something of another step up. And I think you could make a pretty good argument they've both taken a step back. Brooks looks every bit the coverage liability. This new defense is not reducing that liability the way I was hoping. It seems like he's playing the run okay. PFF actually has his run defense grade up at like 68 or something. And I'm not putting the run defense on him specifically, but he just kind of looks like a guy out there right now. And Taylor, I know he's causing some chaos in the backfield, but he can't tackle. He's not actually finishing plays. Like, where are we with these guys right now, you think?
I'm with you on the linebacker assessment. I do think Brooks has had, I think I'm a little lower on what Pro Football Focus has for Brooks as far as the run game goes. And some of it's not his fault as well, because the fact that those guys up front aren't taking up blockers. These guys are getting guards up on the 2nd level on our guys free and clear. And that's a bit of the issue here. Brooks isn't a big guy. He's not going to be able to just hammer and take on a guard and, take him head on and slide off. He's got to be using his quickness and speed more than that. And so some of it is that, but he has looked a little bit to me, my eyes in both realms, to be struggling. I think you're right to say that there's a step back that's been taken here by Brooks that I did not expect this year. Maybe he's not a fit for a 3-4 defense. Maybe he's better having 4 guys up in front who are keeping him a little more clean at that point to just kind of run around and create havoc. We may kind of come to find that just is the situation. And I'm open to that. You've got to find a way at some point with him, if that is the case, then to make that transition back if you're going to go long-term, or we got to look at him maybe not being, the long-term answer there for you at that point. Which was the other guy you mentioned? Sorry. Taylor. I was never quite as high as others on Taylor coming into this year, Brendan. And because I had real worries about his run liability. He's not a plus run defender. He's not close to being a plus run defender. I don't think he's going to project to being a good run defender. I'm starting to kind of draw in my assessment of him a little bit, and it's going to start to get more into a state, frankly, where I'm going to say, maybe you're just a pass rush guy. Maybe I just need to get you in with your ears pinned back and go, and that's just what you are. And it's okay if that's the case. That can be useful on this team, but then we have to tap our brakes on this guy having any kind of star power in that point. He's going to be more of a Bruce Irvin in that role of things and where he really factors out to. And let's also face something here. After he had his first five sacks last year, from those games onward through the first 2 games of the year, the pressures have gone and dropped considerably with Darryl. He is not even getting you any pressures on the quarterback, really. So, I know he's got a lot of talent. I know he's really quick, and some people think he can be like a Vaughn guy, but where is the productivity at this point? He's played a lot of snaps over the last 8 or 9 games. I think he's maybe had 2 sacks over that time period or something like that. There will come a point on him where go, okay, well, he kind of is what he is at that point, which isn't consistent in the pressure. He's not taking the step, forward there. For my money, frankly, too, Boye Mafe was your top-rated defender in this game. Are we sure Boye Mafe is not a better run defender right now than Darrell Taylor?
I mean, it's not hard to be a better run defender than Darrell Taylor right now, I guess.
Right.
That's the conclusion you have to draw. And Mafe, I know it was kind of one of those BS sacks that shouldn't be a sack, but he did get our only sack too. So at this point, I mean, I'm not saying we should just completely give up on Taylor, of course.
No,
we don't have anywhere near enough information to do that. But I do wonder, one part of the problem might be Nwosu and Taylor are playing too much. Like, those guys are on the field constantly. We've got very little rotation. They both played almost like I think Nwosu played 90% of the snaps against the Broncos. They both played 50 plus in both these games. Let's get Mafe a little more burn. Let's give Daryl Johnson. I think that's his name, Daryl Johnson.
Yeah, that's right.
The guy we brought in.
Yeah.
Let's get him some burn and maybe try to see if we can get more out of these guys if they're playing fewer snaps. But yeah, I'm up for the Mafe thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you're probably playing him too much. Alt Robinson being down definitely lightens the load and it's going to stress everybody a little bit. I think Uchenna is at least giving you some impact from that side, whereas Darryl is just, it's been a complete liability and he's getting attacked in the running game. Teams are aware of his liability over there. I think you make a strong argument to me that Boye is going to be better, at least at setting that edge and holding things down the run game. And maybe we should flip roles between those guys. We thought Boye was going to be the rotational pass rush guy. Maybe he needs to be more of the early down run defender guy. And then you bring in Darrell Taylor later.
Yeah. Paul Third, thank you for the $2. Impressed with 49ers backs. That defense has no holes. That Hufanga guy, he's good.
He's great. He's really come on for them.
How did he get down to the 5th round? They missed Jimmy Ward, and it's like it doesn't even affect them.
He didn't show the instincts on tape, I think, at a USC that he's been showing right now. He had highlight plays, but you watched him on film and he was always a little bit slow to react. He's moving like a slow step, not only a step faster, but everything's just very intuitive for him on the field. I watched him in that Bears game. He was doing the same thing in the Bears game. So it's sort of it's like the Herbert jump you take from Oregon to the pros, where it's like people go, why didn't you see this? It's like, well, the tape was what it was. I mean, I didn't know that potential was lingering around in there under the surface.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there have been a few people that have said, oh, that game happened because Trey Lance got hurt. If we played against Trey Lance, it would have been way better. And Jimmy G coming in saved the Niners. And so to talk about the defense a little bit more, if Trey Lance stays in that game, I think they have 300 rushing yards. Like, they ran for 200 with Jimmy.
I think we were going to lose that game, no matter who was at the helm, Jimmy or Trey, in that game. I agree with you. And it would look different. You wouldn't have maybe thrown for as much yards as Jimmy, as efficiently as Jimmy did, but he would have gained more yards on the ground. And he was moving them already when he was in there, but when he got injured, he was moving them. It wasn't like they were completely stagnant like last year when Lance came in the game and he couldn't do anything. So he was getting it done. And that rushing attack was still going to be there with Trey as it was with Jimmy. That wasn't going anywhere away. And you certainly were struggling with that right from the jump as well.
I guess one other thing to highlight here is, I don't know how many penalties we had on our secondary, but I think it was like 5 holdings, pass interference, illegal contact, basically automatic first down plays. And some of them came on 3rd down to get off the field.
How
Big
convenient.
Part of the reason. Yeah. I don't want to talk about Tariq Woolen in this regard because he's so young and it's expected that he's not able to play the ball the way you would like. Kobe, I think, is just miscast as a nickel corner. Let's talk about Michael Jackson for a second, though, because he's been around a while, and some people are trying to figure out, is this guy good enough to be part of a future good Seahawks team? From what you see, what is Michael Jackson?
I think he's a little more rounded out than you've got out of Kobe. I think they thought Kobe was going to be ready to go day one on this, and that it's a little bit more of a maturation process for Kobe, where he's a little more typical in that rookie phase, where I'm going to need a little bit of time here to kind of grow to where I need to be. And so during that time, they're going with Michael, who's got a little bit of a head start on that development side, and Michael has played really well for you. Every time you put him out there to play, he's held up pretty well. He's never embarrassed himself in any game he's played here since he's come on the field. So I think that the coaching staff just likes that consistency they're getting there versus starting two rookie corners. I mean, it's again that old axiom that Bud Grant once told Coach Carroll, which is that you're going to lose a game for every rookie you start. So we're up to 5-6 rookies here. That's 6 losses I'm counting right there off the jump with those many guys you got running. And so Carroll's probably wanting to limit a little bit of that if he can. But Michael's earned the job. I've thought that it's also a little bit of indicative of what Michael's probably done on the practice field, where this is what we've hoped is that competition can return to becoming king here. I'm thinking it's that. There's no other reason you'd have him start out there, because if the competition wasn't king, Sidney Jones would just be the guy who would be given the job right now. And that's not the case. And Tariq Woolen wouldn't have started, which is not the case. And so it's really, I really pull away, at least the thing I really like about what I'm seeing from this team so far is that it does appear like that competition is truly the thing driving this year. That's why I want Boye Mafe to be in here. Boye Mafe popped in the preseason. He popped in this last game. He's earning the right to overtake Darrell Taylor. You can't come at me and go, Darrell Taylor was a second-round pick, and we had to give up a third-round pick to move up in the second round, and he's been here a year longer. I don't care who's playing better. They deserve to be on the football field. That's what I want this team to go back to. I really get obsessed with that, Brendan, because that was really, to me, at the bedrock of how you got your team created before. And what made that team so good was that just – sense and ferocity of competition that existed every day in practice. And you got to me, try to strive to get back to that same state that you were before. You cannot create the same roster, but you can create the same atmosphere.
So when Trey Brown gets back, hopefully in, I think, 2 more games, and then he can come back in the 5th. What do you think is going to happen there? Because with the way things are going in this secondary so far, I'm kind of hoping that Kobe gets put on the bench, because the nickel corner, it's just not for him. And can Trey Brown play nickel, you think? Is that something in his skill set?
I've thought a lot about this. I think it's in his skill set from a standpoint of he's a shorter guy, great short area burst. So he's very twitchy as an athlete in that respect, which would lend himself well to playing the slot. I think the team's going to have him back in his same role. I think that's what they're going to chart him back, is put him in the outside. The best skill set for Trey Brown is his ability to stack receivers. He has an innate inability to just be able to stay on top. Receiver can do this, right? And he just finds a way to always be keeping them in front of him, which just makes sure that he stays clean over the top, which Carroll's going to love that first and foremost in a corner. If your first skill set is, I'm going to stay clean over the top, you're not beating me deep, along with Trey Brown, pretty good corner around that as well. But that's the thing I saw last year that stood out to me so well with Trey, was this weird ability to just, guys couldn't get around him. He was always staying on top of them, and he would prevent them from getting up to speed on routes, which is just, you can't teach that. That's kind of just something you kind of just have in your bag. And so I think he'll probably overtake Michael when he comes back for the outside road. And unfortunately, you're going to have to deal with the Kobe growing pains out of the slot, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I would be okay with it if I thought he was going to be good in the slot one day, but his skill set just, I don't know. It doesn't look like it to me. He looks like an outside corner, and I believe he will be a good outside corner. Mm-hmm. But is it helping him to play nickel? Is that helping his development? I don't know. It's hard for me to believe it is.
Well, this is that old thing that they say. They say if they've got the flexibility, versatility and flexibility helps your development, of course, according to Coach Carroll in these camps through the years. That's why we've seen guys move from different positions all the time. I think you and I lean a little bit more to, it's hard to already learn one position in the NFL. You start to ask me to learn 2 and 3 different positions. It might stunt my development just a little bit by asking me to do that versus just letting me concentrate on one true blue thing. He's 6'1". He's not got usually a little bit of the more smaller size you want to get out of the corners to be able to change direction. He's got great short area burst as well, Kobe. But I agree. I don't know that it's exactly the fit. And really, I don't think that this is what they had in mind either, Brendan. I think they thought Justin Coleman or Ugo or Marquise Blair were to the 4th guy, I'm sure, on their presumptive offseason list as well. So it's a matter of, because you have not good options there, you're going with this one.
Right. And I mean, that's basically the whole, I guess Josh Jones, who I've always kind of liked, he looks a little slow out there to me now. Now that I'm actually watching him play every snap,
Mhm.
so I'm a little cooled off on that. I'm not going to give up on it, but I'm a little more open to the Jaquizy Tart solution than I was a few days ago. I'll say that. Anything else on the defense spring to mind?
Nothing necessarily. I wouldn't mind trying to upgrade either the strong safety position or getting another pass rusher in here at this point. I think are two things that kind of stand out to me. The guys are going to have to figure it out on the inside of the defense as far as the defensive line goes. I just don't think there's going to be an option to bring in. I think you're right with Helber Harris will stabilize things maybe a little bit, but those would be the two positions that I would look to target if we're talking about not major moves, just a trade deadline move, just to upgrade the position from where they currently stand. You know, your fourth pass rusher on the board and your starting strong safety. So I'm okay with Tart. I'm open to Tart.
Yeah.
Tart, Landon Collins, whichever.
Oh yeah, is he on a practice squad right now? I remember somebody saying the other day that he was.
He might be, but you could still pluck from practice squads. That's how we got
Right.
Tease Tabor.
Yeah, that's true. Man, that guy's fallen far then. $90 million contract or whatever it was to the practice squad, and doesn't even feel like that long.
No, they gave him a lot of money on that. And he was a weird guy to watch through kind of his, I liked him coming out, but then he seemed to be kind of tepid when he came out, but then he kind of found his stride and then made the deal, but then he's back to being kind of tepid, I guess, because he's not even on a roster right now, necessarily outside of practice squad. So yeah, a little strange career trajectory for Landon Collins.
You know, with all that stuff we just talked about, with all that stuff that we just went through that happened on Sunday, we probably still came out of that game better than the Niners did, didn't we? Because that's a little bit, even though they won, that's a little bit of a catastrophe, isn't it? What went down?
It is. I'm still not, I got a little bit of a conspiracy mind with stuff, Brendan. I'm not certain that Shanahan wasn't trying to get to Garoppolo. And my reasoning being is that you're running power quarterback runs up the middle multiple times in a first quarter. I understand you want to use Trey Lance's legs and that's his greatest attribute. Power runs up the middle. Running backs always tell you, Brendan, that the worst hits that they take are between the tackles inside. You can't see where the hits are coming from. You can't adjust fast enough like you can on the outside. Strange Shanahan using his young guy that way. I have and it's a little bit of my wonder about if he was really a Lance guy or a Mac Jones guy, because we did hear some scuttlebutt about the fact that he was more Mac Jones than he was Trey Lance, and he got kind of maybe talked into the Trey Lance. It does hurt them. There's no doubt about this. This sets them back. Garoppolo is a one-year situation unless you're looking to pay Garoppolo. And if you're looking to pay Garoppolo again on a multi-year deal because you don't trust Trey Lance because he's coming back in injury, you've defeated the whole purpose of having a young quarterback on a young, cheap deal. Not to mention, by the way, Trey Lance starts to cost some significant money as he moves into year 3 as the number 3 overall selection in an NFL draft, which does make its share of money too. So it's simply wonderful to see themselves about to fall into this sticky situation.
Yeah. I personally believe as of right now that the Trey Lance thing in Frisco is done, because unless the Niners go on a deep run, Kyle and John are going to be on the hot seat. And I believe they will not be willing to bet their jobs on a quarterback who has basically not played football in 3 years. He's played like 3 or 4 games, right?
Right. Well, let's walk it through on the other side then. How does it play out? They go out and win 11 games this year, 12 games. How does it play out on the other side of that?
Well, if you do that good, then maybe maybe your job isn't in danger, and maybe you can do things a little bit differently. But if the Niners are just okay, if the Niners maybe barely make the playoffs or barely don't, then I think you have to look at it and go, hey, next year is one of the greatest quarterback classes of all time. There are some guys who are going to be ready immediately, guys who are more Kyle Shanahan style. And you might just, let's say you can get a Hendon Hooker in the 2nd or 3rd round, somebody who's ready to go and play in that Shanahan offense. I think you go, sorry, we got to ditch the Trey Lance thing. So I suspect that the Trey Lance era may just never get started at this point, because I don't know if Kyle's in the hot seat, but I feel like he could be. I just don't think he's going to bet his job on a 22-year-old kid who's now played like 4 or 5 games in the last 3 years. So I suspect it's pretty much over. I think they're going to bring in somebody new. And the question I had was, is Trey Lance, if that comes to pass, is Trey Lance the biggest bust in NFL history?
No, not yet.
Mm.
Because of the age and because there's still time for this to come about. I mean, the injury today, for instance, that he suffered. It's like your coach puts you in a situation to get injured, and you got injured. I had echoes of a Robert Griffin with Washington when Kyle Shanahan was the offensive coordinator there, and the way they use that mobile quarterback. He doesn't seem to be able to have a mobile quarterback where he understands use the mobility, but also find ways to protect him and save him from himself a little bit. It's sort of like, let's go buck wild with it. If he can run, let's have him run everything. And I think that's a little bit of shown to be a little bit of a hole in Shanahan's game here. I still like the kid long-term, but again, 22 years old. That's all he is 22. I don't think you can close the book on a kid that is that young. He should be able to recover from these injuries.
Yeah. I mean, he'll have an NFL future elsewhere. I'm not doubting that, but I think his Niners career is basically over. And if that's the case, you spent 3 first-round picks on a guy who gave you like 4 or 5 games and then pieced out. At least Jamarcus Russell gave the Raiders like 2 seasons.
Yeah. No, it is certainly one of those trades that, I mean, look, it's, and we don't have a lot, like we had the Jamal Adams trade. This one's worse in the respect of you have 3 first-round picks and I think even extra on top, if I'm not mistaken, like a throw-in. So that's not good. It's not, that's absolutely not, it's going to hinder him or hurt him. There's no way you overcome that just by going, oh, we'll just shake that one off and keep moving. On top of like what you mentioned, not only is it those 3 first-round picks, it's also you're still down a first-round pick this year. You might need to add your roster in other places, but you find yourself stuck in the second round, taking the best quarterback available on the board, might be the 10th quarterback by that point, if you're picking deep in the second round.
Yeah.
And now you're back to also putting more assets into the position than you would have liked on top of it, which we have to add too. So it's just a tough situation for San Francisco, and that's definitely good in our favor as we go forward. Because remember too, Debo's contract, they're going to sign Bosa to a new deal, Trent Williams's deal. We got Jimmy Ward making money, Fred Warner making money for them. They got a lot of guys making some good money and top of the line money at their positions as well within these contracts. So their cap situation is also something to monitor within this, as they're going to be coming up against it.
Yeah, and to be clear, when I talk about Trey Lance as being an all-time bust, I'm talking about it in terms of like the result.
Yeah.
Not that the player is that terrible, like not in the Ryan Leaf or Jamarcus Russell sense, but in terms of you getting literally 4 or 5 not even very good games out of a guy you spent 3 picks on. Like that's pretty cataclysmic. So my next question is, does John Lynch get fired just because it's such a catastrophe? Because presumably he was the driving force, or does he kind of dodge that?
I think that they're going to still find a way this year to get themselves in the playoffs. And I think if they do that, I don't think anybody gets fired at that point. You're right on. If maybe they miss it, that's something that people start to raise some alarm bells, excuse me, within that respect of things. But they built a pretty good roster here. They went far last year in the playoffs than anybody thought they were going to go. So they're coming off a year where people thought, okay, they'll be good, but they got almost back into the Super Bowl again. I think that an ownership is more likely to look at the situation and go, we've got a dynamic here where these guys have gotten us right to the edge of a Super Bowl this close. Is there something hindering them or holding them back from taking that little extra step over the top to push us over? No, probably not. We just couldn't quite get over on those ones. Things just kind of break our favor in another year or two here, and that's how this goes. I think they just kind of maintain, because I think overall they're going to feel good about where they are. But again, if they miss the playoffs, Brendan, yeah, he's definitely going to be looking at a little bit more of some questions on that, especially with this draft pick. Excuse me. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I just, I wonder sometimes when something goes that wrong, does somebody just have to get fired just because?
It can happen. One bad decision from a general manager standpoint, if it's big and bad enough, we've watched it a couple times over. I'm trying to think of some examples, but I know there's some guys out there that it's like, well, that got him fired. It's like,
I think the ultimate example was Kevin Pritchard in Portland for the Trailblazers. He was a good GM, but he took Odin over Durant. Yeah, I think it's Durant.
That's right.
Maybe. Yeah.
That's
right. I think a few years later he got fired because it didn't matter that he was a pretty good GM. Otherwise, they couldn't get past that. Never mind the fact that every GM in the league would have taken Odin over Durant at that time. But that's the point. Like, yeah, it's not totally your fault, but somebody needs to go because of this.
Changes do need to occur. And it's possible it could come down like that. I mean, it certainly is, especially if there's a little bit of a difference of opinion between Shanahan and Lynch as well into this dynamic, right? So if you have two guys that are not butting fully heads, but they don't have the same clear vision on what they want to do, like you might have seen with the Mac Jones versus Trey Lance decision, that also could be something that pushes this forward as far as change goes for him, because on top of making the bad decisions, you're not getting along with the coach. We've got to find a guy that's in simpatico with the coach, and you guys are on the same page. And frankly, look, Brandon Ayuk getting drafted, then put in the doghouse, Trey Sermon picked in the 3rd round and then released a year later. He's obviously not always loved Lynch's picks and always embraced the picks at every single turn, in certain respects. So there could be some of that there.
Yeah, we see that sometimes here. I think that's what happened with Marquise Blair. John liked him, Pete didn't. And once we got Blair in here, Pete did whatever it took to get him off the field those first couple years. Like, I'm going to trade the farm for Jamal. I'm trading for Quandre Diggs. I'm putting Tedrick Thompson out there, even though he's ending up on a meme page every single week. Like, I don't care. I am not playing Marquise Blair no matter what. So I think that's what happened there.
I would say that all the evidence seems to back that up, because I still feel like Marquise didn't exactly get a fair shake when he was here from a chance to really prove he couldn't do it on the football field. You moved him. Don't forget also, you moved him to slot for the first time in his career as well. Don't forget that little bit as well.
Yeah. Didn't you move him from free safety to strong safety to slot corner? I think at one point they even talked about moving him to outside corner. That never happened, but I remember that.
Yeah. Those are all signs that you don't really embrace the guy when you're doing all these moves. So I agree. That's absolutely.
When you look at something like that, it makes you want to have your coach and GM be the same person, so that doesn't happen. But then you look at it and you're like, that never works. It never works when the coach and the GM are the same person. So I guess it's just hard.
It's like Holmgren, man. I mean, you're talking about a situation when Holmgren came in here and he did what you were talking about doing. He was going to have a purified vision for what he wanted to run, and then he was going to be the general manager to execute that vision. And you could see what he was doing with it. You could see the plan in place as it was unraveling and how he was building it, getting the line in place. And then you got Sean, you got receivers on the outside that Gordon Robinson drafted with Darrell Jackson the previous year in the 2nd round. So you got your bookend wide receivers, Jeremy Stevens in the 1st. But then he went all talent, no character, right? And where it was like, or not no character, but there would be character questions there. And then that was that blind spot for Holmgren as the GM, which was enough to upend him and have those duties then be removed from him. And so that's the little bit of the problem, is these coaches, when they get in that general manager role, can they can't quite, it seems like that to not know what you don't know type thing, right? You get in that thing and you're like, I'm the head coach, I'm the general manager, I know everything, I got this. Versus, okay, I'm wearing a couple hats here. I've got to listen to my people here on the general manager side of things. I got to take into my advice. I got to have smart guys around me who are really helping, guiding me. I get to make the final decision, but I need that input coming in and really giving them that weight as they talk to me. And I think there's too much of that stuff, Brendan, where you just get that, I run this show, it's my ship. Kind of like you picture Bill Parcells back in the day, right? Just this is the big tuna, like this is how I do, this is my way or the highway, all the way down the line.
Yeah. All right. So real quick, bright spots from that game. We already talked about Woods and Nwosu. I would say Charles Cross is included in there. Cross played a good game.
Cross played good. I thought he was solid on the other side. Yeah, I'd put him in there.
Yeah. Lockett had a good game, over 100 yards in a game like that. Yeah.
Lockett was great. He ran his routes well. He caught the ball excellently. Did a really good job. Love what I saw from Lockett. I think too, I know Quandre Diggs had the missed tackles. I still thought Quandre Diggs played pretty well overall in the secondary. I'm not saying he played great, but I think he did as good as he could in those situations. It's like last year, when he had Derrick Henry coming down the sideline, busting out that 50-yard run, and you got Quandre coming up to try to tackle him. It's just like, there's going to be times where the guy's going to be bigger than him and he needs help around him to make that tackle. But that's also what you normally see from free safeties, is they're looking more for the cavalry to arrive and to help them out as they wrap up. I think Quandre's been good in coverage. We haven't gotten beat deep. He's kept things clean over the top. So he would be a guy that I would point to on that.
Yeah. Can we get to my second hand here? Because I've got a full hand of bright spots. Dixon? How about Dixon?
Dixon? We'll go Dixon. Dixon looking good. Dixon solid. Tariq good. Tariq was look, they're up and down, but overall way more ups in what we're seeing from him and then downs.
Yeah, I know blocking a field goal in the NFL is rare, but if you look at what he does in terms of his size and speed and quickness, he might be able to do that semi-regularly, right?
Go watch the second kick of the game prior to his block. He misses it by this much.
Hmm.
By this much, Brendan.
Right. And I think that's going to do it for this game, man. We picked through it. It wasn't fun. It wasn't pretty. It was often disgusting, but that's part of the process, man. That's part of being a fan of a team that is in a stage like this, right?
100%. I mean, there's going to be days like this that we got to pick it over. I think the key on this is to not try to dress something up falsely or to try to make excuses in the name of patience. We got to have patience. Like you said, lock in on rookies, lock in on young players, lock in on guys finding their way, have patience with them. But for a coaching staff that's very elder, for not making schematic changes that you told me were going to be inputted and put in here, coaching staff, well, then those things, a little less patience, just a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah, that's hopefully by this time in a month we'll have forgotten about all this because we'll be implementing those things and we'll be seeing those things and we'll be feeling better. But we got a game coming up this week against the Atlanta Falcons at home. Going to be kind of interesting. We'll talk about that more on Thursday. But I think that's going to go ahead and end the show for this episode. Thank you everybody for coming out. Thank you, Brandon, for coming out and being with me.
My pleasure, my man.
Uh-huh. And hope to see you guys in the near future when we do this again. We're on his channel on Thursday, I believe, talking about the Falcons. So had over 200 people in here pretty consistently throughout the show. Thank you, everybody. And even after a game like that, I think we still got to do it.
Gotta let them know.
Mm-hmm. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.